The armory was supposed to be just another silent room filled with forgotten weapons. Behind the counters, Evelyn Sayer quietly polished a forgotten rifle, a supply clerk who blended into the background, efficient but invisible. But silence shattered when Colonel Mitchell Kane's hand froze on an old M24 sniper rifle. His eyes locked on a mark burned deep into the wood, the insignia of the Phantom Division, an elite sniper unit that never officially existed. And standing before him, polishing the weapon with practiced precision, was Evelyn Sayer, a woman the world believed had died years ago. Suddenly, the question wasn't about routine paperwork or dusty rifles. It was something far more dangerous. What happens when a ghost of the battlefield refuses to stay buried? The fluorescent lights of the armory hummed faintly, their cold glow bouncing off rows of rifles, pistols, and meticulously stacked crates of ammunition. For most soldiers stationed at Fort Richardson, this space was nothing more than a pit stop. They signed forms, picked up their gear, and hurried off to training ranges or deployments. Few ever noticed the woman who kept the entire system running like clockwork. Her name was Evelyn Sayer. On paper, she was nothing more than a supply clerk. Her uniform was always crisp, her hair neatly tied back, her clipboard balanced carefully in her hand. To the hundreds of officers and enlisted men who passed her counter every week, she was efficient, professional, and, perhaps most importantly, forgettable. That was exactly how she wanted it. Evelyn had mastered invisibility. She moved quietly between shelves, checking inventory, updating logs, and cataloging equipment with an almost obsessive precision. While others laughed, argued, or boasted in the corridors, she rarely raised her voice above a polite acknowledgement. She did not linger for small talk in the mess hall, nor did she attend social gatherings after hours. In an environment where hierarchy and personality often clashed, Evelyn had cultivated the rarest of reputations, someone reliable, yet unremarkable. But beneath the surface of her quiet life lay a truth no one around her could imagine. Evelyn Sayer was not just a supply clerk. She had once been part of a unit so secretive it existed only in whispers. A unit with no official record, no insignia on public files, and no trace in military history textbooks. The Phantom Division. For years, Evelyn had lived as one of their most skilled snipers. She had fired shots at distances few thought possible, worked missions on terrain that never appeared on maps, and walked among teammates who understood that recognition was a luxury they would never be granted. The Phantom Division's operations were buried under layers of classified reports and denied operations. They were the ghosts called upon when failure was not an option. Yet here she was, 3 years later, quietly processing rifles in Alaska. To an outsider, it made no sense. Why would someone with her record, if such a record could even be found, choose to live in anonymity, wiping dust from forgotten weapons and balancing supply sheets? The answer was simple: survival. Evelyn's team had been betrayed. The last mission in Afghanistan had ended not with victory, but with blood and fire. The official story claimed mechanical failure, a helicopter crash, and a tragic accident that killed every member of her squad. Families received folded flags and medals. Graves were filled, coffins sealed. But Evelyn's coffin had been empty. She had walked away alive, carrying both the weight of her survival and the knowledge that someone inside the system had orchestrated the disaster. To keep living, she had become someone else. The new identity had been carefully constructed. A transfer, a simple background, no red flags. She erased every trace of the sharpshooter she had once been and replaced her with a faceless clerk. Day after day, she filed forms and maintained the facade. But suppression never truly kills instinct. Even in her quiet duties, Evelyn carried herself with a discipline that set her apart. Her posture was straight, her movements efficient, her eyes scanning more than they needed to. Soldiers who interacted with her occasionally remarked that she seemed sharper than the average clerk, though they dismissed it quickly. After all, who would suspect that a woman cataloging spare rifle parts might once have changed the course of battles? Evelyn herself had grown used to the mask. It was easier to hide behind the monotony of numbers and ledgers than confront the ghosts of her past. Still, there were moments, fleeting, dangerous moments, when the mask threatened to slip, when her hands lingered too long on the barrel of a sniper rifle being checked back in, when her eyes calculated wind drift out the armory window without conscious thought, when her instincts flared at the faintest sign of tension in the base. Those moments scared her more than any firefight ever had, because they reminded her that no matter how deeply she buried Evelyn, the sniper, Evelyn the phantom, that part of her was not dead. It was waiting. For now, though, she remained in her carefully constructed cage of anonymity, a clerk who blended into the background, a woman disciplined enough to keep her head down, invisible enough that even officers forgot her name minutes after signing her paperwork. That was the safety she had built. But safety has a fragile limit, and Evelyn's life, her mask, her silence, her invisibility, was about to crack the moment someone recognized what she had spent years hiding. The armory always smelled faintly of oil, dust, and metal, and Evelyn had walked past the same shelves, the same stacks of crates, the same dull gray walls for 3 years. Nothing in this place surprised her anymore. Nothing, that is, until the day her eyes fell on the old M24 sniper rifle resting in the shadows of a forgotten corner. At first, she tried to ignore it. The weapon was tagged for decommission, a relic from another time. Soldiers passed it without notice, preferring the gleaming modern rifles lined up on the racks. But Evelyn felt something stir inside her the moment she glimpsed its battered wooden stock. For 17 days, she resisted. She forced herself to process pistols, carbines, and even grenade launchers before she allowed herself to glance back at that corner. Every time she walked past, the rifle seemed to whisper. It was not just an object. It was a memory carved in steel and wood. That afternoon, with the armory unusually quiet, Evelyn finally gave in. She carried the M24 to the counter, her movements precise yet almost reverent. Dust floated into the air as she unwrapped it from the old storage cloth. Her fingers traced the grooves in the stock, the scratches left by years of use, and without realizing it, she began to polish the weapon. Her hands moved automatically. Every motion was the result of countless repetitions drilled into her muscle memory during years with the Phantom Division. She dismantled the rifle with speed that spoke of expertise far beyond the role of a supply clerk. The barrel, the bolt, the scope, each piece was cleaned with a practiced care that revealed not just skill, but love. To Evelyn, the rifle was not merely a weapon. It was a part of her, a connection to a life she had buried. She inhaled deeply, the familiar smell of gun oil filling her senses. And with it came memories she had tried for so long to suppress. The mountains of Afghanistan, nights spent on ridgelines with the wind biting at her skin, her spotter, Marcus Chen, whispering wind calls in her ear, the crack of her rifle cutting through silence, followed by the hollow stillness of a life ended from a mile away. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She had told herself she had left that world behind, that she was nothing more than a clerk. But with the M24 in her hands, the truth was undeniable. The sniper in her was still alive, and she wasn't alone. Clerk Sayer, a voice said from behind her, steady, male, carrying the kind of authority that made the air shift. Evelyn froze. She turned slowly to see Colonel Mitchell Kane, a tall man with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. He was not the type to waste time on idle curiosity. His presence in the armory itself was unusual. Most officers of his rank left weapon checks to subordinates. Yet here he was, standing just a few feet away, his gaze fixed not on Evelyn, but on the rifle. "Where did you pull that one from?" Kane asked casually, though there was an edge to his tone. "Back corner, sir. Marked for decommission," Evelyn replied, her voice calm, almost bored. The voice of a clerk doing her job. Kane stepped closer, his hand brushing the weapon. His finger stopped on the stock. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She knew what he had found before he even spoke. Burned deep into the wood, faint but unmistakable, was the insignia of the Phantom Division. The room seemed to shrink. Kane's expression changed, not shock, but recognition. His thumb traced the symbol as if confirming what his mind already knew. Then his eyes lifted to meet hers, sharp and searching. Evelyn kept her face neutral. Years of discipline helped her hold his gaze without flinching. But inside, she felt her carefully constructed life collapsing. The insignia was not supposed to exist. The Phantom Division was not supposed to exist. Yet here it was, carved into the rifle like a ghost refusing to stay buried. "You've got steady hands for a clerk," Kane said finally. His words were mild, but his tone carried weight. Evelyn forced a small shrug. "Basic maintenance, sir. Regulation requires it." Kane studied her. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken truths. He wasn't fooled. Not for a second. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he measured her stance, the subtle confidence in her movements, the way she handled the rifle as if it were an extension of herself. For 3 years, Evelyn had lived unseen, but now under Kane's watchful gaze, her invisibility shattered. The colonel tapped the stock once more, then leaned closer. His voice dropped, quiet but deliberate. "Interesting mark. You don't see many of those these days." Evelyn's pulse quickened, but she answered with steady neutrality. "Probably just a field carving. Soldiers personalize their weapons sometimes." Kane's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it's something else." The words hung in the air like a blade. Evelyn felt the weight of them press against her chest. She realized then that her cover was slipping. Not because she had spoken too much, but because Kane had seen enough. In that dim armory, with one old rifle between them, Evelyn's past had clawed its way back into the light. The Phantom Division was no longer a secret she could bury. It was a truth etched into wood and memory. And Colonel Mitchell Kane had just uncovered it. Colonel Mitchell Kane did not leave the armory right away. He lingered as if the old M24 had tethered him to the room. Evelyn felt his gaze follow her as she reassembled the rifle with practiced ease. Her motions were calm, her breathing steady, but every nerve in her body bristled with unease. She had been in interrogation rooms before, on both sides of the table, and she knew when someone was testing for cracks. "You keep that rifle clean," Kane said at last, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Cleaner than most clerks I've met." Evelyn gave a faint shrug, slipping the bolt back into place. "Regulations don't change with the dust, sir." He chuckled softly, though there was no warmth in it. "True enough. Still, you handle that weapon like you've known it for years. Like an old friend." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Evelyn kept her expression neutral, her voice level. "Weapons are just tools, sir. I've been around them long enough to treat them with respect." Kane stepped closer, his boots clicking against the concrete floor. "Respect is one thing, intimacy is another." His gaze swept her up and down, not inappropriately, but analytically, as though he were cataloging every detail. The way she squared her shoulders, how her stance was perfectly balanced, how she avoided unnecessary movement. "You don't carry yourself like a clerk," he said finally. "More like someone who's seen the field, someone who survived it." Evelyn placed the rifle back on the counter, her hands steady even as her pulse thundered in her ears. "I've only ever been assigned here, Colonel. Supply is what I do." "Is it?" His voice was deceptively light, but his eyes bore into hers. "Tell me, Sayer, did you ever serve overseas? Afghanistan, perhaps?" The name struck her like a bullet. Afghanistan. She felt her throat tighten, memories clawing their way back through the wall she had built. Burning sand, the crackle of radio static, the flash of betrayal in her commander's eyes just before the ambush. Her silence was answer enough. Kane tilted his head, studying her. "I was there myself. Different theaters, different years. But I know the look. People who've been through fire, they never lose it. They just learn to bury it." Evelyn forced her voice into motion, clinging to the fiction. "I've never left Fort Richardson, sir." He leaned forward, lowering his tone. "Then tell me how you dismantled that rifle in less than 30 seconds without looking at the manual. Tell me why your hands don't shake, why your eyes calculate distance every time you glance out the window, why your instincts shift whenever someone enters the room." Evelyn felt the walls closing in. She had trained for deception, for cover stories, for surviving interrogations. But Kane wasn't reading her file. He was reading her, and he was seeing through every layer she had built. Finally, she exhaled, her voice flat. "What do you want from me, Colonel?" Kane straightened, his expression softening just slightly. "The truth, or at least enough of it to explain why you're hiding in plain sight." Her jaw tightened. She looked down at the rifle, its stock scarred with the mark of the Phantom Division. Ghosts stirred in her mind. The team that had been her family, the betrayal that had ended everything, the night she should have died. "They're gone," she whispered before she could stop herself. "All of them." Kane's brow furrowed. "Who?" Evelyn closed her eyes, the memory burning behind her lids. "My unit. We were sent into the Hindu Kush on a mission that never existed. Intel was supposed to be solid. It wasn't. We walked into an ambush. RPGs tore the sky apart. My spotter was hit first. The others didn't last much longer." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "The report said mechanical failure, a helicopter crash. But that was a lie. We were betrayed." Kane let the silence stretch, absorbing her words. "The Phantom Division," he said quietly. Not a question, but a statement. Evelyn's eyes snapped open. Her breath caught. He knew. "I heard whispers," Kane continued. "A ghost unit. Operatives too good to acknowledge. Missions that vanished into black files. They said one sniper could hit targets at distances no one else could even attempt. I didn't believe it. Until today." Evelyn's voice hardened, the bitterness she had buried rising to the surface. "We were erased. My teammates got caskets filled with stones and flags folded with lies. I got a new name and orders to disappear. Survival was my only mission." Kane studied her for a long moment. "And yet, here you are, still alive, still dangerous." Her eyes narrowed. "Alive doesn't mean whole. I've spent 3 years pretending to be invisible. If you expose me," he raised a hand. "I'm not here to ruin you, Sayer, but you need to understand something. Ghosts don't stay buried forever, especially not when the living keep looking for them." The weight of his words settled over her like a storm. Evelyn realized then that Kane wasn't just probing, he was preparing her. For what, she didn't yet know. But the truth was out. The cover she had clung to was gone, and the sniper she had tried to kill inside herself had just been resurrected. The silence in the office felt heavier than body armor. Evelyn sat rigidly across from Colonel Mitchell Kane, her eyes locked on the folder he had slid across the desk. The manila cover was unmarked, no classification stamps, no labels. But the weight of it was undeniable. Documents like that didn't exist unless someone had gone far beyond ordinary clearance levels. "Open it," Kane said quietly. Evelyn hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to retreat back into the shadows she had spent 3 years constructing. But curiosity clawed harder than fear. With deliberate care, she flipped the folder open. The first page stopped her cold. It was a photograph, grainy, taken from a long lens, but unmistakable. A small group of operators, faces half-shadowed, dressed in the gear of her old unit. The Phantom Division. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had believed, with absolute certainty, that she was the only survivor of that ambush. She had built her entire new identity on that truth, and yet here they were, alive, breathing, watching her from the faded ink of a surveillance shot. Her throat tightened. This isn't possible." Kane leaned back, folding his hands. His gaze never wavered. "Possible or not, it's real. You weren't the only one who walked away from the fire, Sayer. Some of your people survived. They've been working, quietly, strategically, ever since." Evelyn tore her eyes from the photo and scanned the other documents. Reports, transcripts, patterns of payment funneled through shell corporations. Names of officials she recognized, people who had shaped missions, authorized operations, and betrayed them with a single word. Her hands trembled despite her effort to control them. "You're telling me the same people who sent us to die are still in power?" Kane's jaw tightened. "Yes. Some of them hold even more influence now than they did back then. They've buried their mistakes under layers of bureaucracy and rewritten files. But the truth remains. And that truth has teeth." Evelyn slammed the folder shut, unable to look at it any longer. Memories swarmed her. The flash of RPGs, Marcus Chen shouting wind calls, Rachel's laugh over the comms, Daniel cursing at faulty gear. Ghosts she had mourned, now clawing their way back into her present. "Why show me this?" she demanded, her voice raw. Why drag me back into a life I buried? Kane's expression softened. Not much, but enough for her to notice. Because they asked for you. They knew you were alive. They knew you were hiding, and they believe you're the missing piece. Evelyn blinked. They asked for me? He nodded. They've been building a case, gathering evidence, planning something bigger than revenge. But they need precision. They need someone who can make the impossible shots, someone who understands both the targets and the stakes. And that someone is you. The room tilted. For 3 years, Evelyn had convinced herself that invisibility was safety, that survival was enough. But survival without justice had hollowed her out. Now justice was being dangled in front of her like a loaded weapon, and it terrified her. You're asking me to go back, she whispered, to pick up where we left off, to become the person I swore I'd never be again. I'm asking you to finish what was started, Kane replied firmly. This isn't just about vengeance. It's about stopping corruption that could undermine everything we fight for. The people who betrayed you didn't just kill soldiers. They compromised the integrity of the entire system. If they aren't stopped, more lives will be thrown away in the same way yours was. Evelyn looked down at her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The thought of returning to the battlefield ignited something inside her she had tried to extinguish. A hunger for justice, an ache for unfinished business. But along with it came fear. Fear of losing herself again. Fear of bearing more teammates. Fear of becoming nothing more than a weapon. Her voice cracked as she asked, "And if I say no?" Kane didn't hesitate. "Then you'll keep living like this, filling out paperwork, polishing rifles no one will ever fire, hiding from the truth until it catches you anyway. Because believe me, Sayer, it will catch you. Ghosts don't wait forever." The words cut deep. She wanted to argue, to insist that anonymity was enough, that peace, however fragile, was worth clinging to. But the fire in her chest told another story. She had never truly wanted peace. She had wanted meaning. Slowly, she reopened the folder. Her eyes fell once more on the photograph of her surviving teammates. Marcus, Rachel, Daniel. Older now, hardened but alive. They had not given up, and they were calling her back. Evelyn exhaled, long and unsteady. If I do this, it won't be for them. It won't be for you. It will be for my team, for the ones who never got the chance. Kane nodded, his voice steady. That's all the reason you'll ever need. For a long moment, the room was silent. Evelyn's heart pounded with both dread and determination. She had lived 3 years as a ghost, hiding in the shadows. Now the shadows themselves were demanding her return. She closed the folder and met Kane's gaze. "What's the first step?" His lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "We begin at 1400 hours. You'll meet the others then." Evelyn swallowed hard, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through her veins. For the first time in years, she felt alive, not as a clerk, not as a fugitive, but as the sniper the Phantom Division had once relied on. Her war wasn't over. It had only been waiting. The gravel crunched beneath Evelyn's boots as she stepped out of the car, her eyes fixed on the weathered cabin ahead. The mountain air was sharp, laced with pine and silence, and every instinct in her body told her she was crossing a threshold she could never uncross. Kane's coordinates had led her here, away from the base, away from the safety of her anonymity. She had told herself it was just curiosity driving her forward, but deep down she knew it was hope. Hope, dangerous and raw, that the ghosts of her past had not all been buried. The cabin's door creaked as she pushed it open. Light spilled across wooden floors worn smooth by years of use. The smell of coffee and gun oil hit her immediately, so familiar it ached. She froze, scanning the room, her senses sharp as a blade. And then a voice broke the silence. "Hello, Evelyn." Her breath caught. Standing near the far wall was Marcus Chen. Older now, lines carved into his face, but his posture steady, his eyes unwavering. He had been her spotter, the one who had whispered wind calls in the dead of night, the man she had trusted with her life more times than she could count. She had seen him fall. She had mourned him. And yet, here he was. She struggled to speak. "Marcus, you..." Surprise, he said softly, a flicker of a smile tugging at his lips. I know. You thought I was gone. Before Evelyn could answer, another figure emerged from the kitchen. Rachel Ivers, tall, sharp-eyed, her presence as commanding as ever. She carried 2 mugs of coffee with casual grace, as though this were an ordinary morning. But Rachel had never been ordinary. She was the intelligence officer who could weave fragments of intercepted chatter into a map of survival. You're late, Rachel said, her tone dry but her eyes betraying warmth. She handed Evelyn a mug. Still like it black? Evelyn took it with trembling hands. I buried you, she whispered. All of you. Not all, came a third voice, rougher, blunt. Daniel Cross leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. He looked older, scarred, but unmistakable. He had always been the direct one, cutting through hesitation with a single word. We don't die that easy, Daniel said flatly. Evelyn's chest tightened, torn between relief and fury. You let me believe I was alone. 3 years thinking I was the only one who survived. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Marcus stepped closer, his voice calm but steady. It kept you alive. If you'd known the truth, you would have come searching, and searching would have gotten you killed. We couldn't risk it. She shook her head, bitterness rising. So you left me to drown in a lie? Rachel's expression softened, though her tone stayed sharp. We left you to live. It was the only option. Silence stretched between them, heavy with years of grief and secrets. Evelyn stared at their faces, alive and real, and the storm inside her raged harder. She had mourned them, carried their ghosts in her sleep. To see them now was both healing and unbearable. Daniel broke the silence, as always. Enough. You're here because you're done hiding. Admit it. Her eyes flashed. I didn't ask for this. I built a life, quiet, safe. You built a prison, Daniel shot back, filing paperwork while the people who betrayed us climbed higher. You hated every second, Evelyn. You can lie to yourself, but not to us. The words cut deep because they were true. Evelyn had never belonged in the shadows. She had only forced herself to fit. Marcus placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding her. No one's asking you to forget the pain. But look at us. We're still here. And the mission isn't over. The people responsible are still in power. We finally have a chance to fight back. Rachel leaned forward, her voice clear. 17 names, 17 targets. We've spent 3 years building the case, connecting the dots. But we can't finish this without you. You were always the anchor, the one who kept us together. Evelyn's eyes dropped to her coffee. The bitterness on her tongue mirrored the storm inside her. She had dreamed of justice, cursed the betrayal in her sleep. Yet when safety came, she had clung to it like a lifeline. Now standing here, she realized it had never been safety at all, just surrender. Slowly, she set the mug down. If I do this, it won't be for politics. It won't even be for revenge. It will be for the team, for the ones who didn't walk away. Daniel's smirk returned, sharp and certain. That's the only reason that matters. Something in her cracked then. Anger, grief, maybe even relief. A short, sharp laugh escaped her lips. Foreign but real. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like Evelyn Sayer again. Not the ghost hiding behind a clerk's uniform, but the sniper who had once changed the course of battles. The reunion hurt. It reopened wounds she thought had scarred over. But it also gave her something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The phantom division was whole again, and together they had unfinished business. The cabin grew colder as the weight of the mission settled in the room. The table between Evelyn, Marcus, Rachel, and Daniel was cluttered with files, maps, and surveillance photographs. 17 faces stared up at them. Politicians, contractors, intelligence officers, even a decorated general. Men and women who had orchestrated the betrayal that nearly wiped out the Phantom Division. Rachel spread the dossiers with precise hands. These are the ones who profited from our blood. Every decision, every ambush, every manipulated order, it all traces back here. 17 targets. Evelyn leaned forward, scanning the images. Each face carried a title, a reputation, a shield of power. To the world, they were untouchable. To Evelyn, they were executioners, hiding behind medals and authority. Daniel's voice was sharp. We don't get courtrooms or headlines. No medals. Just shadows. We hit them clean, we vanish, and the system never even knows it bled. Marcus added, quieter but resolute, and it has to be us. No official unit can touch this. It's too dirty, too deep. The law won't save us here. Evelyn sat back, her chest tight. For 3 years, she had convinced herself she could escape this life, bury the sniper inside her. But staring at those faces, she felt her pulse steady. The anger she had suppressed was no longer poison. It was fuel. Kane's voice echoed in her mind. Ghosts don't stay buried forever. Rachel's eyes met hers. We've prepared everything. Safe houses, intel streams, extraction routes. But precision shooting? That's you, Evelyn. Without you, the plan doesn't work. Silence pressed in. Evelyn felt the weight of 3 years of grief pressing against the decision before her. Walk away and the lie of peace would continue. Step forward and she would embrace the truth of who she was. She inhaled slowly. Then I'll do it. Not for politics, not for orders. For them. For the team that never came home. The others nodded. No applause, no celebration. Just grim acknowledgement. They knew what this choice meant. A war fought in the dark, without recognition, against enemies who would use every resource to silence them. The briefing continued late into the night. Routes were plotted, identities rehearsed, contingencies debated. But Evelyn's mind kept circling back to the same realization. She was no longer hiding. Every motion of her hand as she checked the maps, every instinct rekindling inside her, told her she was stepping back into her true skin. When the meeting finally broke, Marcus lingered at her side. You sure about this? He asked softly. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes steady. I've never been more sure. I thought survival was enough, but survival without justice is just another form of surrender. Her words hung in the air, heavier than bullets. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel gave a curt nod. Rachel's expression softened, and Marcus's faint smile returned. They understood. The Phantom Division was back. Not officially, not publicly, but in the only way that mattered. Bound not by orders, but by loyalty. Fueled not by vengeance alone, but by the need to set right what betrayal had broken. Evelyn stood, the old weight of her rifle slung over her shoulder. The ghost of the battlefield had risen. She was no longer a clerk, no longer invisible. She was Evelyn Sayer, sniper of the Phantom Division, and this time she would not hide. Evelyn Sayer's story reminds us that hiding from the past may keep us safe for a time, but true peace requires courage and justice. Her choice to step out of the shadows is not only a soldier's tale, it speaks to all of us living today. How often do we see corruption, betrayal, or injustice in our communities and remain silent, hoping someone else will act? Evelyn teaches us that silence can feel like survival, but it often becomes another form of surrender. In modern America, where questions of integrity, loyalty, and accountability remain at the center of public life, this story challenges us to reflect. When faced with wrongdoing, do we turn away or do we stand up, even at great cost? Some may see Evelyn as a hero reclaiming her purpose. Others may view her decision as a dangerous return to violence. And perhaps that tension is the very heart of the story. It forces us to ask ourselves what justice really looks like. What do you think? Was Evelyn right to step back into the fight, or should she have held on to the fragile peace she had built? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and join us again here on Touching Stories.